Great to have you with us again as we talk Oklahoma State Cowboy football. Coach Gundy is here, and we were supposed to be talking about a game at Baylor, but that game has been postponed to December 12th because of COVID concerns with Baylor's football program. So, gosh, Coach, it almost seems like a science fiction movie from a football standpoint. And that's not to minimize what's going on in our country with COVID, but canceling games 6 days out, you've had 2 of those now. I mean, to think back what your mind would be going through last year compared to this, it's mind-boggling.
Well, it's unusual from the standpoint of that we put so much work into both those games, and then they get canceled, so you just kind of file it away. The difference with Tulsa, we did play them later, but now we're off of Baylor. Baylor goes back into the middle of December, so you take all that and file it away, and now get ready for Iowa State. I've had a lot of questions today from people about how it affects your team, how it affects your coaching staff. This has been such an unusual year. I don't know that it really even affects them anymore. Do I think they want to play? Sure. They like to play games. Coaches are getting ready. You put a lot of work into it. But I don't know that anything surprises any of us with what's gone on this year.
Yeah.
I think they'll be fine. It is what it is. Can't change it. We're not playing Baylor. We're playing Iowa State, and we have another open week. So we actually tried to pick up an opponent for this week, unsuccessfully. Coach Holder was working hard to try to get us a game, but it didn't work out. So we all have to deal with it, and it comes back to one of the areas that we talk about a lot in our culture and our organization is you got to stay focused. I mean, if we let these things derail us in our thought process and our preparation, worried about something we can't control, then it could affect you 2 weeks from now. So hopefully we have enough maturity in this organization and the players understand it's just the way it is. We got to flip it, and now we got to start getting ready to play Iowa State.
Is there any benefit to it?
I don't know. People ask that. You could go all the way back to COVID later in the year and students not being here to maybe 2 or 3 players that were banged up a little bit, get a little more rest. Then you go to the other side of it where some people say, can you keep them focused for 2 more weeks to get ready to play a game? Well, you should be able to. I mean, Iowa State, in my opinion, is kind of the front runner in this league right now based on the teams they've played and their record at this point, if you're just standing back looking at it. So they should be able to prepare and focus to get ready to play Iowa State.
So as far as managing the week is concerned, would you do something that might be unusual, like prior to the Tulsa game? You scrimmaged on the Saturday before the Tulsa game, which is typically unheard of. Right. Would you have some kind of a significant scrimmage just to try to offer that to the routine, or do you know yet? Because
of the 2-week layoff, we need to set up some sort of conditioning practice session that would be similar to game type, in my opinion. I'm going to discuss it more with the staff later in the afternoon to come up with ideas and thoughts other than my own. I have a plan for what I would want to do, which I just mentioned. I'm going to see what those guys say. There's a lot of smart guys in that staff room. And then we have to be able to take that information and instill it in the team, because that's what's most important. They have to be able to buy into it and focus on all the different things that it takes for them to get ready to play a football game.
We'll have more with Coach Gundy in just a few minutes. Stay with us.
Gear up for fall at Academy Sports and Outdoors.
It's time for Ask the Coach, presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors.
Coach Gundy, what part of your daily routine do you look forward to the most?
Kayla, my daily routine that I look forward to the most is spending time with the players. We do so much as coaches. When we get on the field with the players for an hour and a half, hour, 45 minutes, it's really awesome to be out there with the young people.
butter lettuce over there?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank
ma'am.
you so much.
You bet.
Okay.
Just try a little bit here.
Hey, Jay, can you grab that?
We'll get right on it.
Thank you. I know how much you guys love tomatoes, so I have stories to tell you about these tomatoes.
ADM milling is really a part of the fabric of the Enid community. So if we were to have lost them, it would have been more than the 70 jobs that they employ.
OG&E, the City of Enid, and the Enid Regional Development Alliance were all great to work with. Not only does it allow for the growth of the new mill, but also the power is there to make that happen for the future.
We continue with Coach Gundy. The Cowboys were supposed to play at Baylor this weekend, but that game has been postponed to December 12th because of COVID concerns within the Baylor football program. So now with another off week before Iowa State, is there any area that might benefit? For example, the offensive line, which you had to restructure after week 1. Do they benefit maybe from some time in practice, additional time to work together?
Every position should benefit. You know, we get additional days to practice. Iowa State gets additional days to practice. So there's not any leverage either way. Comes back to what we talked about earlier in the show, is that we need to keep the guys focused and get good quality practices. They don't have to be long practices. They don't have to be real physical practices, but they need to be quality practices where we're getting information across to the players and they're able to execute it in practice and they can use it in the game next Saturday.
To what extent now are you concerned about getting all 10 games in? It seems like, and of course, you've got lots of other things to worry about besides that, but the reality is now it seems like the margin for error has been burned up a little bit. So what are your thoughts?
It has for us, based on already having a cancellation. Where other teams are at in their testing, I don't have any idea. I feel pretty good about us based on what's going on. This week will be interesting because we tested on Sunday after being gone for 2 days. You and I talked last week that the results that we will get on early part of this week are somewhat concerning to me just based on having 48 hours of free time. They haven't had 48 hours of free time in 6 weeks in preparation. If that comes clean, then hopefully we've made some real strides in protecting ourselves. To a certain extent, it's not going to be flawless. The virus is not going to be flawless anywhere, in my opinion. But if you can keep it to a minimum where you don't have to stop your program, then it gives you the best chance to keep playing games.
You're 3-0. You're ranked number 7 in the country. Do you think, and I'm asking you a question, it might be hard to answer, but do you feel like because you have so much at stake as a program that keeping these guys focused and out of harm's way is easier? Because there are some teams that have started slowly. Perhaps it's not as easy for them. Do you think there's some truth to that or no?
Oh, it can go either way. Again, this comes back to how we handle our team, the maturity of our team. They play the games. They get prepared to play in the games. They have to come together as a group, the leaders, and convince the other guys that haven't been around enough or are young that we have to practice well and stay focused in order to play. Iowa State's a really, really good football team. They slipped up early in the year, didn't even look like themselves. Since then, they've played really good football. We have to convince them and or they have to buy in themselves to the preparation part of it. Whether the national ranking, being undefeated, whether any of that factors in or not, I know that somehow we have to get those results because that's ultimately all that's going to matter that could actually factor in when we play Iowa State a week from this Saturday.
Jessica Morey sits down with motivational speaker Damon West when we continue after these messages.
You need more layers, diagonal layers.
I got it, Ron. Thanks.
Leave him alone, Dad. Oh, honey, you should use ice blocks instead of cubes.
No, Bud Light Seltzer goes on top.
Diagonal layers.
Did you pre-chill the Bud Light lemonades?
Need more ice. And diagonal layers.
I mean, if you're going to do it right.
I don't need my hands getting cold.
Why don't you try using the Plumsky method?
Brings out the citrus notes.
Dad?
Gotta crush the ice, son.
Okay, I'm out.
What's his problem?
Whenever packing the cooler really, really matters, there's a Bud Light there.
joint pain, take the first step at mercy.net/cowboysortho.
I'm Jessica Moy, joined by motivational speaker Damon West. Damon, you have made the trip to Stillwater to speak with our student athletes here. What brought you to Oklahoma State?
No, what brought me here is one of your coaches here. It's the tennis coach, Chris Young. He and I spoke during the COVID, during the pandemic, and I was speaking to different sports teams, and he asked me to speak to his tennis group, and I did. I did my presentation that I normally do because I was giving it away during the COVID, because I believe that every group, team, organization needs the coffee bean message, because the coffee bean message is about the power being on the inside of you, not on the everything going on around you. And so Chris and I started talking. He's like, hey, this would be really great for the rest of our student athletes at Oklahoma State University. And so we just started kicking around some ideas and some dates, and he took off with it and ran. I mean, he has put together this entire 2-day package, and it's really, I mean, he's done such a great job. So I'm here because of Chris.
And you mentioned the coffee bean. Kind of break that down for me.
So the coffee bean. So whenever I was, I guess I got to give you a little backstory. So I was, this will always catch people by surprise. So I was in Dallas County Jail. It was 2009. I had just been sentenced to life in prison for my role in a bunch of meth-related burglaries in Dallas. And they call these burglaries the Uptown burglaries. And I was the leader of an organized crime crew. And so a jury sentenced me to life in prison. As I'm getting ready to go to prison and serve that life sentence, I'm asking all these guys in Dallas County Jail, how am I going to survive? What am I going to do? You know, my mom and my dad had one last visit with me before I'm going to prison. They told me, you know, you come back as the man we raised, or don't come back at all. And my mom makes me promise that I won't join any of these gangs, these Aryan Brotherhood type gangs, because I'm scared, because I'm the minority in there, you know. And so I'm asking all these guys that had been to prison before, how am I going to survive? What am I going to do? And every guy I'm talking to, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, they're all telling me the same thing. You got to get into a gang. You can't survive without a gang. The gang is your family. They're telling me things like this. But I promised them I can't go into the gang, you know. So there was this one guy, this older black guy named Mr. Jackson. And Mr. Jackson, probably in his 60s, I didn't get Jackson's real age. And he's what you call a career criminal. Been out of prison all of his life. But he was the most positive guy I've ever met, Jessica. This guy had a smile on his face all the time. And so one morning, Mr. Jackson comes up. He's got a cup of coffee in his hand and a smile on his face. And he says, West, I've been watching how you're dealing with these knuckleheads and these dummies. Talk about you got to get into a gang. He said, do not listen to these fools. He said, but let me tell you what prison's going to be like. He said, I want you to imagine prison as a pot of boiling water. And he said, anything we put in that pot of boiling water is going to be changed by the heat and the pressure inside that pot. He said, I'm going to put 3 things in that pot of boiling water and watch how they change. A carrot, an egg, and a coffee bean. And so he walked me through it, Jessica. He said, if I put a carrot in that pot of boiling water that we call prison, he said, what happens to the carrot? And I said, well, Mr. Jackson, the carrot turns soft. He said, that's right. He said, the carrot goes into prison hard, but the water of the prison changes the carrot, beats it down, turns it soft and sad and weak and mushy like a carrot. He said, what about the egg? And I said, well, the egg turns hard like a hard-boiled egg, Mr. Jackson. He said, that's right. He said, the egg has a shell that protects it physically, but inside that egg, that soft liquid core, his heart, becomes hardened. And he said, if your heart becomes hardened, you're incapable of giving or receiving love. And he said, if you're incapable of giving or receiving love, you've become institutionalized, and you will not come back as someone your parents recognize, because your eggshell will have swastikas tattooed all over it. And that's when he asked me, what about the coffee bean? And Jessica, I had no clue. I didn't know what happened to a coffee bean in a pot of boiling water. And that's when Mr. Jackson told me. He said, if I put a coffee bean into that same pot of boiling water we call prison, he said, now you have to change the name of the water to coffee. Because he said the coffee bean, the smallest of these 3 things, he said, small like you, had the power to change the entire atmosphere inside that pot. He said, because the power is inside you, West, just like it's inside the coffee bean. And that's when he told me, everybody in life puts out energy, negative or positive, and whatever kind of energy you put out, you attract back. And the last thing Mr. Jackson tells me before I'm leaving prison to get on the prison bus for the Texas Department of Criminal Justice to go serve my life sentence, he tells me, go out there and go be a coffee bean. Be a coffee bean, Jessica. And that's the message I take to teams and groups and corporations, everywhere I go speak, because the coffee bean message is something that everyone can use, because the world is in a giant pot of boiling water right now. But you've got 3 choices how you respond to it. You don't control what's going on around you, but you control your response to it.
That is great stuff. You mentioned you speak to a lot of teams. Being a former athlete, how does that help you kind of identify and maybe personalize your message a little bit more to the student athletes you speak to?
I think it's really helpful to be going in front of athletes being a former athlete, because they know that you've been there, you've done that. They know that you know the pressures of being a student athlete, and especially the time pressures that are on you as a student athlete. You've got more on your plate than most normal people do, most normal students do. But it's also the commitment and the sacrifice that you make to be a student athlete. And I think that that's a shared experience. It's a currency I have to spend with other athletes. And they listen to the story, and I think that in a lot of ways the story's got a little something there for everybody, because it hits on everything. It hits on it's a cautionary tale about the dangers of drugs, consequence of bad decisions. It's a story of a message of hope, of perseverance, about truly being able to bloom whenever you're planted. I mean, I became that coffee bean inside of a maximum security prison, but it's also a story that deals with what we're going through right now in America with race and racism, because I take people through the bowels of a prison, and it's the most toxic environment there is, but show you that no matter what environment you're in, you can be looking like that coffee bean too. And being an athlete, that athletic mindset has totally helped me out in life, and I want to show them where it applies in other aspects of life.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, Damon West. This was great. I know our athletes are going to love it.
Thank you, Jessica.